All right, so welcome everybody. I'm Brooks Rayford, president of NC Tech, and I want to welcome you all here in the room and those who are viewing us through the interwebs to this Q2 session of our Government Vendor Network. We've been doing this for many years. This year, as happens in some years, we had a special session back in March when we featured a larger venue and larger meeting to meet and hear from the new state CIO. She's been everywhere. I don't see how she gets everywhere. I've been with her on a few of those trips. She's very energetic, very open and welcoming, and very eager to make a difference in North Carolina. I think a lot of feedback has been very good so far from interactions with her. So excited to have had a chance to feature her. And before I go further, I want to really give special thanks to the Brooks Pierce firm, Ed Turlington, and over there, and Drew Moretz here, represent NC Tech. Represent NC Tech as the firm has, predating my 17 years here as our legislative counsel. So public policy matters for us, very important, and also hosting us, which is great for them to do. A newer addition to the Brooks Pierce firm is former Secretary of Commerce, Tony Copeland, a good friend for many, many years, but who's now heading up the firm's economic development practice, and is always good to come in when he's here to join us. And you get in trouble when you start recognizing individuals, but I'll have to welcome especially Chris Estes, former state CIO. Welcome. Glad to have you here with us. You've been to several of our sessions of late, and appreciate that. In fact, we joke, I guess last year there were at least three, if not more, former state CIOs who came to our annual Tech Day at the legislature. It was a nice little reunion for them all to come from Charlotte, especially since you travel. So thank you for all being here. Quick note that we are recording this session. As I mentioned, we have online streaming for this. So we'll send a follow-up email to everyone who is registered for today with a link to the video and to the slides that you'll be seeing, any materials that we'll be sharing with you. A couple of announcements looking ahead. Our next major event is our annual State of Technology Conference. It's taking place here in the Triangle on May the 15th with a welcome reception the evening before. You can view the speaker lineup on our site, nctech.org. We've actually just added someone that some of you who are local may know as I believe a closing speaker, Scott Wingo, who's a very successful entrepreneur, has had several very successful and very well-known exits, has just launched another startup, actually, and he heads up something called the Triangle Tweener Fund, which invests in triangle-based technology company startups. And this kind of arose from a Triangle Tweener list that he started some years ago, where he would just sort of every year publish a list of those companies that met certain criteria for recognition. And a lot of folks encouraged him to start an investment fund based on that, which he did. And it's become one of the most, every quarter there's a report out, it's become one of the most active funds in the country. And it's based right here in the Triangle. There have been a couple of, it's an early fund, so there's been a couple of exits, but I think a lot of good will come out of that. He's brilliant and very interesting guy, so we're happy to have him talk about AI and its impact on startups. It's kind of going to be his theme, I think, and what we might see in that respect. So with all of that, today I'm excited very much to have a good friend and longtime NC Tech member who is in a new key role in our state as our featured guest. So to bring a few words of greeting and introduce our speaker is Sean Alba, who is with our meeting sponsor, Presidio. Sean?
Thank you, Brooks. Presidio is pleased to sponsor today's session of the NC Tech Government Vendor Network. Presidio is a longtime partner of the state IT solutions provider. We're happy to be here and be a regular participant. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting Bernice Bond, who has recently been named, as everyone knows, the Chief Information Security Officer for the North Carolina Department of Information Technology. She's held a variety of private sector and nonprofit leadership roles in the cybersecurity, operations, risk management, IT governance, incident management, and auditing areas. Before joining NCDIT, she was the Chief Information Security Officer and Vice President of Information Security at RTI International. She also owned and ran her own IT risk management consulting firm for nearly 20 years. Bernice is no stranger to NC Tech, given that both RTI and NCDIT have been longtime members of the association. So please join me in welcoming Bernice Bond.
you, and good afternoon to everyone. Um, Thank you, Brooks, for having me. Thank you for hosting. And again, good afternoon. So I'm gonna go through a few slides here, tell you guys a little bit about myself, just some priorities we're looking at the state level from a cybersecurity perspective, and then we'll have some time for some Q&A. Okay. So a couple of bullets I have here just about my philosophy, my thinking, different experiences drive innovation. So it's very important to me, to the state, that when we look at who's at the table, as people that represent the state, we're very into talking about apprenticeships, reaching out to our university and colleges, to our get our young people involved and early and mentoring them and having them in our cyberspace. It's important to have people from private sector and from government, right? And so that all drives innovation, because you have different perspectives, you come up with different solutions. It's challenging right now, so we gotta have some creativity and think a little differently to solve some of the problems that we're facing today. People, processes, and technology. They must mature together. I smile when I say that, because so many people look at the new shiny toy, right? And they're like, hey, I want that, and that's going to solve my problem. I say, hey, what's your process? And there's silence. I'm like, well, if you don't have a good process, that new shiny toy is going to give you the same results. And so that's a big part of my philosophy, is about being intentional, about having documentation for what you do, your processes, and maturing your people. Technology changes so fast. We have to train our staff, right? If we know where we're going, we know that technology changes, we have to invest in our people to make sure. And again, it's funny for, I'm including myself, for our more mature folks that work for the state, we need to be trained on new technology. And it's funny, you look at, again, our students, it's second nature to them. My kids are in college, I'm a techie person, but most of the time I'm like, hey, can you fix that for me? Because they just been doing it since day one. And so it gives you a different perspective, and teaching them too. You have to teach them how to be a little bit more structured when you have to teach us to be a little bit more flexible. And so that gives a good combination. And the fact that technology is an enabler, we can't be afraid of it. It's going to change. We have to try to understand it. We try a little bit to anticipate. You talk about Gen AI. Most people think that cybersecurity, you're supposed to hate it. I love it. Well, I want to use it. I'm looking forward to it. I'm like, tell me when, tell me how, when can I get into it? Because at the end of the day, we have so much information, so much data. We're going to have to automate our processes to be more proactive and less reactive. And so it's very important that when we try to solution, we're always focused on how are we enabling our business to do something. Because at the end of the day, it's about enabling our business. Okay. Our priorities, as Brooke said, the secretary was here last month. Yes, I have to think about it. This is week 8 for me on the job, guys. I want to tell you that, right? It doesn't feel like it, but it is week 8. So around week 2, the secretary came and spoke. But the top 4 priorities are strengthening cybersecurity, closing the digital divide, improve digital experience, and operational efficiency. So you all see I have that little arrow right by my spot, right? Strengthening cybersecurity. And again, what that means is about a little bit of a mind shift. Again, being more proactive, solutioning and not fixing. What I see, and I should step back, and partnerships. Okay, we have to understand who our stakeholders are. We need to have good collaboration with our stakeholders and solution together. I always say cyber is a team sport. If you try to do it alone, you are not going to win, okay? You're just not going to win. And so when I say our stakeholders, I'm not just talking about the security liaisons and the CISOs within the other agencies. I'm talking about the city level, local level, the universities, and I'm talking about with our strategic partners being our vendors, right? Because that's important that we're solutioning together and we're all at the table trying to reach our goals and our deliverables. And so, again, when you talk about my priorities, how I transition or interpret what I hear from the secretary, number one is to promote a culture of shared responsibility. Y'all gonna keep on hearing me say that, okay? I'm like, it's not just me. It's not Bernice's problem, okay? It's all of our problem to solve here, but promote that culture of shared responsibility for protecting our networks and our critical infrastructure. Again, cyber threat actors evolve and become more sophisticated daily. Okay, so we have to work together to share information in a responsible and secure manner, and to not try to always recreate the wheel. Again, if somebody's doing something well, we need to talk about it and figure out how we can implement it and increase that landscape that those good processes are working. ESRMO, that's the Enterprise Security Risk Management Office at the state. That's the group, the umbrella that I'm over. ESRMO. There's so many acronyms, you all. But right now, that encompasses not only the security operations team, it also encompasses data privacy too. If you think about it, what are we protecting? At the end of the day, you're protecting data, right? And then those systems and those applications and so forth. But it's information that is critical to us. So it's very important that we also shift that mindset from being compliant. Compliant does not mean secure. Compliant means I'm smarter than my assessors. That's what compliant means. Right? I'm smarter than my assessors, and so they said, hey, she's doing everything right. But I guarantee you, if I'm secure, I'm compliant. So it's shifting that mentality, because a lot of people worry about, hey, we gotta be compliant, we gotta be compliant. And so therefore, you're just trying to dot your I's and cross your T's, but that's not secure. And so it's again, it's shifting and making people understand that we have the solution, and we can't solution everything. So it has to be a risk-based approach. Okay, that's why risk management is so important here, because we have to figure out what's critical. So you look at your data, it's critical that we know our data, right? The critical data is going to get more attention. The critical data is going to get more controls. The public data, it's a controls, but it's not as much allocation of time because it's not as much risk. So once we understand the risk appetite of the secretary, the risk appetite of the governor, and our other executive stakeholders, then we can figure out, okay, how flexible can we be with different systems, right? And so it's very important that we understand our purpose, and it's not to be compliant. It is to be secure, and it is to have some flexibility. To get that flexibility, though, is very important that we understand the criticality of our assets. Without it, you have to be the most stringent across the board, and everybody thinks, you're being difficult, but you got to secure your crown jewels. Okay. So some of the key challenges that are at the top of my radar, I'll say identity access and management. And part of that is, number one, folks understanding that authentication is not identity access management alone. So many people forget about the authorization part. And I say that because people have way too much access than they should have. So it's all about the least privilege principles. And so it's really, again, articulating to our peers to understand what we have to do to ensure that we have the appropriate controls around The identities. That's also critical to have flexibility. We gotta know who our people are, and we're looking at that from two perspectives, right? And this is really why this is a high priority too, because we're looking at it from state employees, but we're also looking at it from our constituents, right? Because we want to make things easy for the public to do. We want to make it easy for them to access our systems, to do what they need to do on our applications, but we also have to make sure that they feel that what they're doing is secure and protected. Okay, so again, that's going back to that enabler piece. The other part of it is our privilege access management, because at the end of the day, our threat actors are really going after the crown jewels of identity. They want to get to our privileged users because they can do more once they get in. They sit dormant, then they come, wake up, and they're like, let's have some fun. And so privilege access management is very important to me, and that's on a very high priority to ensure that we have the appropriate controls around those key users. The other piece here really is continuous monitoring. We can't be a one and done. Oh, I'll go look at this today and I'll look back at it 6 months from now or quarterly. You really have to get to a point of continuous monitoring, because without understanding what is normal, you're not going to understand what's abnormal. And so that's by getting the data to support how you defend, how you get your alerts. So this is another big one where it's important to identify our baselines, make sure we're having alerts when we're outside of those norms, and making sure that we have the actions where I can use Gen AI, I will, to do those actions, and then where we need to escalate to staff to do more work. But, we really are looking to have our staff be more threat hunting and stuff of that nature. Once we get to a mature level, we have that automation. And then, right back into the use of Gen AI. It's funny, again, I came from the private sector, and, there's a lot of directives where, from a cyber perspective, you have to incorporate Gen AI into your program. And initially, I think that was by 2026. Not quite sure if that's still a strict requirement, but for me, it is very important. Again, we cannot keep up with the pace of our threat actors. They have people, full-time jobs around the globe, 24/7, right? Trying to get to whatever they shouldn't get. And so we have to have a modern approach and modern defense to really help defend against these threat actors. And so that's a very critical point. So again, these are some of the key challenges that I'm focusing on early on. But at the end of the day, I'm looking at all the domains when you think of a zero trust architectural strategy. Because when you talk about baselines, you have to have an architectural strategy, right? Because if you have your architectural strategy, then you can let people know what's expected of them, how to design, how to play within the guardrails, right? And then you have less exceptions. We want to, again, move away from being that, oh my God, you didn't develop your system and you're about to deploy and you just called me. Guess what? You missed 5 things that now it's going to delay you. We don't want to be that group. And so again, having that zero trust architectural strategy, knowing what control points, given flexibility of how, but you know what you're supposed to do, and then using automation where we can to do our continuous monitoring, and then only exceptions to that architectural baseline will be things that we have to talk about from a risk management and risk exception perspective. Okay. So again, just to give you all a high level of some of the things I'm thinking about. Dylan's here. I think I saw Dylan. Oh, okay. I saw Dylan. That was right on time, right? Well, Angela's here too, right? So, but questions, I'm gonna take some now. But if you have something that you wanna send to us, there's Dylan. See, Dylan tried to walk out. He was about to say something. But there's the email that you can definitely contact and get some more information.
Very good. Thank you. We're gonna take some Q and A. I'll kick off with one. We normally would go around the room and have you introduce yourself and who you're with. That would take a long time with this size crowd. I will share with Bernice the roster of those, name, company, and so on who were here, just in case she has interest in reaching out directly. And Dylan, who's a good friend and a good leader over there to make sure the communications get where it needs to go, is a great route directly into DIT. You, in our earlier discussion before this main session, you talked a little bit about the building out of your team. And I have a related question. Maybe talk a little bit about the positions that have recently been added or may be coming online, just so people have a sense of what your group looks like or will look like.
Okay, so, sorry, yeah. So, again, underneath of me, we have our security operations. Security operations, including our risk management, also a security architectural group. That security architectural group will work closely with our network team and architectural reviews, things of that nature. So that's kind of a new role we've added in. And within that new role that we've added in, there will also be staff that focus on making sure we do secure development. So that's a real big one. I think an opportunity that we have to mature that program. So that's underneath there too. Again, we'll have a whole GRC, which is really talking about maturing our risk management processes. And then again, the security ops team, which we have the vulnerability management, things of that nature. But again, maturing our identity hunting, threat hunting, and focusing too on IoTs. That's another big one that we want to mature in. Underneath of there too, we have not had, well, the position is getting filled for our specific DIT agency, CISO, and that's another agency level, but they will focus on DIT specifically. I am one who very much believes in you got to walk the talk, right? So if I'm expecting other agency CISOs to do something, we should have a CISO and DIT requiring the same thing. So we will have a DIT CISO and have the appropriate processes and stuff around the DIT. Also getting a deputy data privacy officer to mature our data privacy program. The secretary also, so 2 weeks ago, we have a new role that this secretary that does not report to me, one of my peers, is actually the I'll call him Chief Gen AI, right? So he's comes from SAS, ESA, very well versed in Gen AI, but really going to help develop processes, policy, and so forth around Gen AI, working very closely with my teams, because it's about how we do things. And if Gen AI is secure and if the data, we're good to go there. So those are some of the key changes. And then we also still have our enterprise data group, which is very important. And that group will continue to talk about data modeling and having big data and how to use that in a good way with the state. But those are some of the big ones.
Thank you. Yes, before now, there was no point person for AI, and every state's trying to get their head around that. There were several people, leaders in the department, that as a group sort of took on that role. So now there'll be a point person, there is a point person to take that responsibility. What we'll do now is open up for questions. Since we did not go around the room, please raise your hand. I'll call on you. Identify yourself and who you're with before your question. The microphone's above you. We'll capture you for those who are watching online, but if you'll speak up, the white noise in here can be a little hard to hear if you're a quiet talker. So I'll start at that end and kind of work my way down. Anybody down here want to ask a question or make an observation? I'll come back if you, okay. Very back of the room had the hand up first. Let's start there.
Yes, my name is Han Kanti, I'm the founder of the company called Ansel. I'm Han, founder of the company called Ansel. We're under the data privacy. I heard that you're adding a new role for the chief data privacy officer. I haven't heard that role in the past. Is that a net new role getting added? If yes, then why?
It's not a new role.
Okay.
We had a chief data privacy officer in the past. we are, doing a bit of a reorg, to ensure alignment, and collaboration. And so, so we're bringing in a new deputy, chief data privacy officer. And that role will be to really, again, help mature that program, policy, processes, training, all of that stuff. And so more to come on that.
If I may ask you the piggyback question, because there was a RFP issued for data privacy, but that, I think that was pulled back again in Q4 last year. So,
RFP issue again.
Yes. It was, yes, it was. So I found out about that last month. And so, there was, and we are looking to have that back out in the near future. Reviewing that to, ensure that, the services, deliverables, are articulated for what we really need. And so there is a review of that and information going back out.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thanks for coming, Bernice. My name's Lindsay Avagliano. I'm COO of Civic Reach. So we are building generative AI tools for use in local government. We're getting some great traction already with kind of forward thinkers, early adopters of that type of technology. But I was wondering if you have recommendations around kind of the best way to get folks in the public sector more comfortable with using AI that haven't historically, and to see it as kind of a useful tool as opposed to a security threat.
Yeah, and well, the first step to getting people more comfortable, the secretary has already done. She's appointed a person who's responsible for Gen AI for the state, right? And defining, you know, Issa has this, and I'm not just saying this because he's my peer, but he has this great way of really explaining what Gen AI is, because there's a million definitions and probably 99% of them are wrong, right? And so explaining what it is and the fact that Gen AI is really not new. Okay, it's been around for a long time. And at the end of the day, it's technology that has matured and that is able to think a little bit more for itself, depending, again, but you have your large language models. But one of the big things is what Issa is doing now. He's defining or developing a definition for Gen AI. He's talking to key stakeholders, explaining what it is, explaining opportunities that the state has to use this technology. And the key, I think I would say the key components of how we do it in a way that's, I'll say secure because I'm security, right? So I'm gonna plug myself. So that's secure, but it also enables. And so by having this clarity that he's giving, it should break down the barriers of the fear, right? And increase the trust. We're working very closely together because there's some foundational things that we have to do, right? We got to understand our crown jewels, right? We got to understand that. And once you understand that and have that in a very good automated way, then you're limitless at what you can do and you can really take the full capabilities. But again, a lot of times people are looking at sound bites, from the media. And, I always used to laugh. I would say, again, in a previous role, I always knew when I was going to get an email from my board. When 60 Minutes said something about cyber, I was going to get an email. It may have nothing to do with us, but I was going to get an email because people look at sound bites, listen to sound bites, right? And so it's a lot of fear because you hear about the 5% of the data that has been exposed inappropriately but you have all of these thousands of other, examples where it was done properly. And so it's about getting that governance around it, and that's what Issa is coming to do.
One last one from this table, then we'll move on to some other tables.
Hi, Bernice. Great. Thank you for your thoughts. I'm Dan Longman with Presidio. Just wanted to share your statewide vision of how you're going to work across city, county, states. I know you shared a little bit of that earlier, but help the audience understand your view of statewide cybersecurity.
Yeah. And so again, my running joke is I'm trying to keep up with my boss, right? The secretary is everywhere, okay? So I'm just trying to be a couple of steps behind her. But it's really important, number one, that we understand who our stakeholders are. And that, it's a lot of different perspectives there. But we understand who our stakeholders are. We are transparent and we collaborate. So it's important to me, and this is a vision that I have for this year where I really want to, once we get our strategy down, documented, start communicating that out, to really pull together a good representation of our stakeholders, and that's folks from large agencies, folks from smaller agencies. And when I say folks, it's really about the security and privacy folks, right? Pulling together from the city, from the schools, school systems, UNC, and representation from MCNC, and all of our other strategic vendors, because if we get at the table together, we can solution with and be aligned. Right now, it's a lot of which I'm just seeing in my first 2 months. There's a lot of good products. There's some processes out there, but we aren't always intentional about the end result. And I want to be very intentional about the end results that we're looking for, and having everybody at the table talking, having input, we can really solution, and that solution may actually really help us for the next few years, right? Because we're building blocks, and we're not fixing something for today, which by time we get it deployed, we already need something else. Or somebody did another variation of something because they didn't know that somebody else was doing something, and there's friction, and those systems can't talk. And so we're really looking to be very intentional, to collaborate, to work together. And so the best way I know to do that is for everybody to sit down together, break a little bread, and have some really good conversations. So that's something I'm looking at to do before the end of the year.
Here, yes, sir.
Bernice, my name is Stephanie O'Hara. I am with Island Enterprise Browser. Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming in today. To tag on the last question, we're talking about collaboration. You're talking about cybersecurity as a team sport. What is your appetite or plan with regards to collaborating around lessons learned, best practices from other states as you step into this role?
Yeah, good question. So I have been talking to a lot of state CISOs. I will continue to talk to state CISOs. I don't like recreating the wheel. So I think it's very important to understand lessons learned, right? And when I say stakeholders, that is the other state CISOs, because there are different maturity levels. I think it's important, at a minimum, that I have a very good relationship with our neighboring states, right? And then, then beyond, but at least with the neighboring states. The other thing that's important, we talked a little bit about, is having that relationship with the FBI. I have a relationship with some people at the local office here, the National Guard, right? Because we're all working together and we all have different capabilities, but we support each other. And so it's about having that trust. And when you have that trust, you're going to reach out to your partner, right? And then you all can solve together. So the state CISOs is the number one. I'm chit-chatting with them a lot now, and I'm gonna meet some of them next week in Philly. And so again, that's the goal, to have somebody's, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Rao, Town of Morrisville, I lead our technology committee. My question is, most cities and counties are moving more applications to the cloud, doing more remote work, and also leveraging a lot of IoT for smart cities. So, but I'm just concerned that we're not talking enough about security issues, and where are the opportunities to collaborate with the state in terms of, like, Apex was recently hit with a really bad cyber attack. It's been almost 6 months and they're still having negative repercussions on getting things back. And so just what is your insight on that as a new system?
It's a couple things. So one is, it's funny. So I'm meeting with 2 city folks. Actually, maybe this week, maybe Thursday. But I'm really starting to focus on, okay, I want to meet state CISOs. I'm trying to talk to, not state, I'm sorry, city CISOs to talk with them to get their perspective. But, and the main purpose of that is to build that trust. I'll be very transparent. There's not a lot of trust right now, so people don't like to share information, right? So we have to build that relationship. Once we build that relationship, we can start talking about our processes, right? One of the things that, we should be doing, I know some of my peers in other states are doing, right, is you have a statewide security. I know I'm not, I just thought about, I stepped away. I'm trying, but you can have a tabletop exercise of an event, right? With more than just your agency. You can have a multi-agency, you can include the city, but you have to build that trust so that you can do these things. The other part of it, I was talking a minute ago about FBI and the National Guard. I sit on with the Joint Cyber Task Force, which are multiple folks represented from different groups there. And it's key, the quicker you reach out, the quicker we can assist. That's number one. The other part though, which is on me, I'll say, again, is to be more transparent about the services we provide and the benefit they can help. I realize, and the secretary realizes that everybody doesn't have that capacity to have 24/7 monitoring and things of that nature. So we have to make some of those services available to everyone in a very affordable way. Because having that, our mean time to detect gets reduced. So therefore, the event becomes, the incident, becomes smaller. So we're looking for that, and also ensuring that we have mechanisms, including the state. I keep saying the state, you all, because I'm thinking about the state CISO meeting I was on earlier. But our cities and our schools of sharing key information, our ILCs. How do we securely share our ILCs? Because if I see something one way, I should be able to say, hey guys, you all need to look out for this and have that implemented, because we don't manage everyone's firewalls and things of that nature. So it's very important to build that trust, to have key people that we can reach out to, and therefore we'll be more transparent.
Got time for one or two more, anybody listening? Sure.
Stephen Franklin, the owner and founder of NowWatch AI. We're actually a small emerging company in Charlotte, but my concern with the state of North Carolina versus some other states that we interact with, like Florida, for example, your contracts for cyber companies are 2-3 years at a time, maybe 5 years. For us to get on the state contract for North Carolina, it has to be that year that it merged, that you guys got on. So other products are on there, they're older technologies. Some of the largest cities won't even look at our products because we're smaller, but we have a newer emerging tech. So how do you have a plan to fix that in that sense? If you could set a, from a doctor's perspective, like a standard of care for a network, should have a monitoring solution, should have some sort of generative AI, but set those rules for the cities and states and give them the ability to go look at stuff that's not on contract, I think would help. But if you could do a contract that was more often, or maybe a startup contract or something like that, and help the rest of us, that'd be great.
I agree. I'll say that first. I agree, and I'm noticing that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I am noticing that. There's conversations being had about how we can be more inclusive, more flexible. And it's very important. I think you said something key about emerging technology, right? One is to have a focus on what is the emerging technology we need that will benefit, because we don't need everything. And when you identify emerging technology that we need, how do we get that in our boundary? So those discussions are I don't have an answer to that,
Sure.
but I have noticed that. So I mean, you bring up a very valid
You said
point.
generative AI, which is great, but as far as I know the cyber contracts in North Carolina pretty well. There's not any tech products in that contract space, except for maybe like Deloitte or KPMG or something like that would be indirect, right? No direct contracts.
No, and again, that's something I know that ESA is looking at. Again, we're looking at what's the technology, because it's twofold, right? You're going to have companies that specifically say this is a Gen AI solution.
Sure.
Then you have the products that we are using today that everybody is now incorporating Gen AI into there. So we're looking at it from both perspectives, right? The existing contracts, and what does that mean? Because when we got into some of these contracts 5 or 10 years ago,
Right.
there was nothing in there about Gen AI. So what should that look like now? Having those conversations for those contracts that should continue and that are continuing. but what does that look like in new ones that talk about this specific product? Because you're right, we don't have that. So those conversations are being had, and I would say more to come on that. Okay. Mhm.
Let's close out with Al.
I'm Al Barnes with Chain Guard, formerly with SecureWorks, which got a 5-year deal. So sorry about that. But to piggyback on the councilman's question around applications, I was excited to hear about your new secure development staff coming on. I think second to identity management, the tax service areas applications, particularly all CVEs that are coming in. How far left is that person, that team going to go? Is it going to go down to the images pulled from GitHub, Docker Hub, or from PFOB in the parking lot, which is about the same these days? Or is it going to be more hard images? Can we talk about that at all?
So again, I think we have to be flexible.
Yeah.
Right, because it's not gonna be a one solution that across the board. But I think it's some foundational things we have to look at doing. We should have a source code repository. That source code repository should have scanning, it should have dynamic scanning. We have to look to have more of a model of cyber champions on our application teams and they understand their responsibility to code secure and the remediation process. But we also have to look at, in some instances, there will be some hardened images, right? And so I don't think it's going to be one answer. I think it's going to be a combination of multiple, but that's a part of me understanding our landscape. And so I'm trying not to put myself in a box, right? Because to think that one solution is going to make it, or one way of doing it is going to work for everybody. That's the thing that I think isolates some of the agencies, because people are just solutioning for their agency, and then you're like, this is our policy. You're like, it's not working for me, so I'm gonna do my own thing, right? Which could be anywhere, right? And so it's trying to have that flexibility. So more to come. Right now I'm just trying to understand, what do we have?
You probably have
What's
the value of images.
Right, and then what's going to work, right? And it may be different solutions, but if we have the same foundation, okay, and then we're still monitoring, and that continuous monitoring in place, we're still reducing our risk posture, so it's more to come on that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Please join me in thanking Bernice for taking. Obviously, you're a popular speaker. It's a very full house. We'll close as we normally do. I mentioned earlier that the Brooks Pierce firm has served as legislative counsel and state policy advisor to NC Tech for nearly 2 decades now, and maybe at that point. And so Ed Turlington and Drew Moretz are going to share with us a brief legislative update and take a few questions if you have any. They have their usual golden handout, which is coming around the room.
Waiting for the handout.
And I'll let you all take it away from there as soon as you do.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to Brooks Pierce. I'm Ed Turlington, and this is my colleague Drew Moretz, and we're fortunate enough to represent NC Tech on government affairs matters. Bernice, thank you for coming, and thank you for bringing your experience and your expertise to the state. One of the joys of doing what we all do is being able to interact with leaders like you, and then also people who've been with the state a long time. So it's a nice combination. So Drew and I have prepared a handout that we hope is useful to you after this meeting. And we're going to share information on 3 topics related to state government and IT. The first, as you can see on your handout, has to do with the state budget bill. You probably know we're in the long session of the General Assembly. Secretary Estes lived through a few of those himself, where the General Assembly adopts a 2-year budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1. Drew and I have put the web address of the General Assembly, which you already know. And if these links don't work, you simply go to the homepage and look in the upper left hand. Drew, could you talk a little about the budget process? We're in just finished step 1, and then what these links will take people to.
Sure, yeah, appreciate the opportunity, as Ed said. So what you have is the Senate's leading the budget process this year. They crafted their 2-year budget, released it and passed it last week. As the various appropriation subcommittee chairs that I spoke to last week pointed out, that is not the budget. Those 1,100 pages, it's a positioning document to start the process. The House is looking to have their budget passed before Memorial Day. They're taking a week off for Memorial Day. So they have about 4 weeks when they come back to get a House budget passed. And then from that point, they will spend the rest of the month of June trying to hammer out an agreement with the Senate and reconcile the two different approaches to budget, and hope to have a budget done by July 1st. And I see a couple of people here who will probably be laughing at that, but that's the goal this year, as it is every year. So what you have here are links to what is called the bill text document. That is roughly 450 pages of documentation, sort of highlighting the various provisions and policy provisions. And then you have the committee report, which is the money profiles, sort of the changes to the appropriations to various line items. Just from a high level perspective, there's a base budget that is continuing. So the recurring dollars that will not show up. So this is all expansion items, or in this case, a number of reductions that have brackets around.
Good. And just a little more elaboration, and Dylan and Angela, thank you for the job you do for DIT. The bill text is the budget. So that's similar to any other bill you read and go click on, except it's 450, 500 pages. As Drew pointed out, the money report, and we tried to help you find the IT section. Very pleased that, as Bernice knows, there's 15 million new dollars a year recurring for cyber, and hopefully that'll be even plussed up more on the course of time. So the second category of things we wanted to flag for you, Drew, as I remember, about 1,800 bills on a variety of topics have been introduced this year, and we flagged 4 of them. Every bill, of course, is important, but we flagged 4 that you thought might be of interest. So the agency typically has agency bills, as other agencies do, DOT, HHS, Human Resources, whatever. And House IT Chair Johnson, I think at the agency's request, has separated the agency bills into 2 bills. One, a more traditional policy bill, one to do with broadband. So those are those 2 bills. And then there are at least 2 bills related to AI we're watching. Chairman Johnson's bill, H934, may be the vehicle that moves. And a number of us have talked to him about that. And we tried to distinguish a couple of things that are different in the bills. The bills as currently written are short, 3 to 5 pages, Drew, as I remember. And before we finish Roman numeral 2, can you talk about what is the crossover deadline and why that matters?
So in North Carolina, we have what's called the crossover deadline for non-appropriation or non-fee or tax type bills, finance bills, that it must pass one chamber or the other before the crossover deadline. This year is May 8th. So when they return, they will have a 2-week sprint to get bills across their chamber. So if it's introduced in the House, it must clear the House. If it's introduced in the Senate, it must clear the Senate, or it's officially dead. So while Ed said there's 1,100 plus bills in the House, or 1,000 plus bills in the House, or 780 roughly bills in the Senate, a lot of those will sort of sit by the wayside. Although, like Lazarus, there is a way to continue to rise from the dead, be it in a budget provision or a catch-all bill, technical corrections bill at the end of session. So where there's a will, there's a way. We keep an eye on all these things and make sure that the good bills move and bad bills.
Yeah, and just a fine point there, and many of you veterans, Zach and Steve and others, Tony, understand this. Let's say that the DIT agency bill that moves across by May 8th will probably not be everything DIT wants, or it might not be great policy. You don't have to comment on that. But the goal is to get it across so it can be worked on the other side. And then our final Roman numeral, as you know, cabinet secretaries have to be confirmed by the state Senate. And as of today, we've had 7 that have been confirmed and 4 that are pending, including DIT. At least in my view, the fact that there's still 4 out there is not a negative. It just takes a while for the Senate to hold a hearing. And I'm not sure of this, but we hear Secretary Piccioni may be coming up soon for her hearing. So if you know any legislators, say what a great person she will be for that. Is there anything you would add on cabinet confirmation?
No, that's it.
All right, and then finally, our contact information is the bottom. We work for NC Tech, who is you. if you have questions, you can't find a bill, you want a tidbit, please give us a call. So Brooks, that's us.
Thank you. And this digital version will be part of what we send back out around following this meeting. So those watching, for those who are here, you'll have that. Looking ahead, the next regularly scheduled quarterly meeting of the Government Vendor Network is July 22nd. Hopefully that's on your calendar. It is on our website calendar, so you can register for that if you like. Again, for in-person or virtual. Speaker to be determined. Make note that the location of that session will actually be in this building, but a different firm. Smith Anderson is sponsoring that meeting and will host us for that session on July 22nd, but same time of day, et cetera. And I think that's about it. Remember the State of Technology Conference coming up on May 15th. Really encourage you to take a look at the lineup there and register or support the event in some fashion if your organization is interested. So thank you very much. Safe travels.